Okay, I think we can start. So hi, welcome to you all. Thanks for joining on this webinar where we'll talk about AWS and Veeam backup and replication solutions. My name is Eddie and I'm the Business Development Manager program at Tech Data on AWS, and I'm here to support you. As you all may know, Tech Data has a lot of competence in-house on AWS and Veeam. So that's why we'd like to talk about the advantages of combining these two great solutions to help you and your end customer to save money, be more agile, recover faster and cheaper after disaster, and a whole lot more. Now, especially for you, we brought two specialists with excellent knowledge on these topics. We have Jerry and Ivan that will present these solutions to you. If you have any questions, we can reply on it after the two presentations. So we will also share our contact information on this feed and also record this webinar for later purposes and review. Thank you very much. And Thierry, are you ready to start?
Yeah, of course. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar about Veeam and AWS and how Veeam can leverage AWS resources, but also protect AWS resources within your infrastructure. Just to start off, it's a review question summary asked by Veeam to their customers, and what costs IT outages in their customers' infrastructure. And so the main thing we see is that it's not just about the infrastructure itself. Of course, disruption in your infrastructure will, let you lose some data, or if you don't have backups, of course. But there are more causes of data loss than just your infrastructure. So if we think about AWS and so on, there are some redundancy features within AWS, its services, like replication and zones and so on, availability zones. But that's more an infrastructure thing, but it will not protect you against a lot of the possible causes of IT outages of data loss. If we think about cybersecurity events, ransomware and so on, or sometimes also insider attacks, or if we, let's say, intentional user admin disruptions, a user who is no longer or is thinking about quitting and is not leaving on a good foot, could delete data and so on. So just the possibilities, the redundancy that AWS offers you will not solve all data loss scenarios, let's say, and that's what this chart shows you, in fact. Another thing is, like I already said, AWS will protect or is responsible for security and availability of its services. But the data is yours. It's the same problem or the same issue we see with other vendors or other public clouds and other SaaS solutions like Microsoft 365 and Azure and Google Cloud and so on. The vendors are each time responsible for security and uptime of their service or their solution, but the data is your responsibility. So it's your job, let's say, to protect that data, or make sure you can protect that data, that you're compliant to whatever policy, government policy or section policy you have to apply or obey to. So that's really important. So, although AWS has some features of redundancy and so on and availability, it's still very important that you protect your data, you make backups so that you can restore just intentional or unintentional user behavior or actions, cyber criminals, and so on and so on. Veeam leverages or offers services in multiple ways for the AWS solutions. First of all, we have the native backup. So for resources which are running within your AWS, Veeam has a backup solution. We're at version 6 at this moment. 5. We're already protecting from what you see on this slide. This is version 4 features, so we can protect your Amazon EBS and EC2 instances. We can protect and backup your Amazon RDS relational database systems, Elastic File System, and of course, we can protect and use the storage S3 and Glacier and the other tiers within your AWS infrastructure. With the latest version, we added the missing relational database solution. There's 6. We only offered 5 until now, but now with the latest version, we also can do backups of the Aurora backup or the Aurora database. Another new thing is that we already could do the backup of the Elastic File System, but now we have a full indexing service built in the product. So Veeam will be indexing everything you backup from the file system, which will guarantee you a faster, quicker restore possibilities. It's comparable with people who know the Veeam Backup Replication for on-site products and their file system backups there. It's quite easy to simply enter a keyword of the files you're looking for, and it will search within those indexing. Now we have that for the Elastic file system backup within the product also. Another new thing is the config of the backup and the configuration database of Veeam Backup for AWS. It's something which wasn't in the previous versions. It's in Veeam Backup and Replication, but it wasn't in the AWS solution. It's something really small, you could say, but it's critical. Simply, if something happens to your configuration or you want to reinstall it and scale it on a different or architecture it on a different way, well, now you can simply back up the configuration you had, backup policies and so on, and then simply put in place your new infrastructure and simply restore the full configuration of your backup solution, which is quite handy. Other notable enhancements also with the latest version, the user experience, the user interface has been changed on a few points dramatically. The welcoming dashboard, for instance, is gone up, I would say, in usability information, usable information that you get there at the first moment you open the product. The worker redesign. The workers, for people who know Veeam Backup Replication, could be compared to the proxy services. So the worker is really the software, the virtual machine, the instance that will be the data mover. So you have the Veeam Backup for AWS, the configuration, the management console, but it's really the worker who will do the work. The worker has been redesigned. You can now select, size it better. And the nice thing with the complete solution is that if a worker is not needed, it's skilled. So it will reduce your consumption on AWS. So yeah, the console itself, the product itself will be running all the time, but the workers are just booted up and when they're needed. And once the backup job or the restore is done, whatever is needed, the snapshot is taken, the worker will be killed, and so it will dramatically reduce your consumption on AWS. And multiple restore is added also now. We can now do a multiple restore of multiple Amazon relational databases or multiple restores from the file system at once. How does the product look? let's first start with the right side, which is really the AWS backup solution, where we have our instance of Veeam backup for AWS running best practice in a separate account, because for AWS an account is really the logical border or the security border. So if you have a production account, make sure your backup runs in a separate account. So there's a logical separation between the two environments. And we of course backup by default to S3 and S3 Glacier repositories. It can work fine like this, standalone within your AWS environment. The nicest thing is the thing Veeam calls the one platform. It integrates fully with Veeam Backup and Replication. You could have locally still with your vSphere or Hyper-V environment and physical environment locally at your own headquarters or data center, how you want to call it. And that's a very nice thing. So you can deploy it. I'll talk a little bit later on it directly from the marketplace. But you could also, if you have already Veeam Backup application running locally, deploy your Veeam Backup for AWS software directly from your Veeam Backup application installation. A nicest thing there is that they co-work. I can backup local virtual machines to my AWS repositories. It's the same data structure, it's the same backup repository structure, and so on. But also I can use the tool as a migration tool, something I made a backup of in my AWS. I could move that virtual instance, that virtual machine, to a local vSphere environment, or even what you see on the right side, another cloud. So we have other solutions like for Azure and for Google Cloud and so on. They really form one platform, so I can use it as a migration tool either. Just move virtual machines around, instances around, like you wish, for whatever reason you have to move the instance. So I already said it, two ways to implement. We have the standalone version. You have nothing locally of Veeam Backup application. You simply install the instance within your AWS infrastructure. You make your backups to S3 storage and so on. Of course, even within that piece of software, I can restore to other infrastructures, Azure, Google, or on-prem. The nicest thing, of course, is the one platform story, where you use Veeam Backup application for your local instances, and then do the backup of any instance in any cloud. Well, maybe not any cloud, but let's say the biggest players, the Google, the Azure, and the AWS public clouds, which is a nice thing to have, especially with the portability, the movability of your data, and so on, because it's not a one world solution or a one solution for the whole world. We see a lot of people just using a hybrid environment, something local, something in a public cloud, or in multiple public clouds for whatever reason. They simply choose the best solution for their needs. Other things why we would choose for the Veeam backup for AWS. Set and forget simplicity. It's a completely policy-driven solution. So once you set your policy, you configure your policy for making the backups and so on. Normally, you never have to look at it again. It will continue doing your backups. Just, probably when you need to do a restore, you will have to access the software again, except for reporting issues or having a look at the dashboard if everything is functioning well and everything is protected. Fast and flexible recovery. It's wizard-driven for people who know Veeam Backup application, the local product, I would say. Everything is wizard-driven. You have the Veeam Explorers where you can simply browse fast or search for a file, restore it, and especially the indexing it's really a flexible system and fast in restores. So the Veeam doesn't invest only in the backup possibilities and capabilities, but they have quite an extensive investment in the recovery solution. A lowest cost backup. Veeam tries, like with the mover, the workers that we kill and so on, try really to minimize the cost of running the backup solution. Therefore, there are calculators within the product also, which give you an immediate view of the estimation of what the backup you configured, the policy you configured, will cost you within your AWS environment. Greater security, of course, encryption supported, fully supported, and please use it. It's a big security feature, and of course, role-based access here are, I think, another point to mention. The one platform I already talked about it. A very nice thing. It's your data. You're the owner of the data. So within the Veeam solution stack, it's one platform. You have the flexibility of moving the data from one system to the other, doing migrations from one system to the other. Quite flexibility, and that goes together with the latest point, the cloud mobility. Just migrate from AWS to cloud to Google Cloud, or the way around from Google or Azure to AWS. Whatever fits you is cheaper or has the better solution for your needs within the environment. How can you buy the solution? Almost like every product from Veeam, there is a free edition. It has full functionality, and it's for 10 instances. You simply go to the AWS Marketplace. There's a separate installation there, and deploy it, and you have a free edition for 10 instances. And there is even basic support. So even if you run into a problem, simply there is an email support, and it's on a best effort base. If you want more than 10 instances and the full support and so on, there are two possibilities to get it. There is a paid edition, which is cheaper than the third solution, but that's really just the standalone AWS solution. You deploy it from the marketplace, and you will pay it through the metering service from AWS and the marketplace. So you as a reseller has nothing to do with it anymore for billing. It simply goes with the billing of AWS itself. It's cheaper than the last option, the Veeam Universal licenses, but it's limited to just backing up the AWS instances. You can't use the cloud portability like I talked about previously. And then the last option is, of course, the most extensive one. It's using the Veeam Universal licenses, both through the reseller, through you and us, of course. And that enables you the full portability of everything. So you simply buy a bundle of instances, and you can use them anywhere and even reuse them. And the nice thing is, if I use the instance to back up something, whatever, from the moment on, there is no more backup points, restore points from 1 month old. That instance will be freed. The Veeam software will see it as no longer in use. Instance will simply add back to your available instances, and you can use it to back up something else. So that's the nicest way to buy your license, and the most flexible way to buy those licenses. And one of the things I said, that's the native solution of backing up AWS instances, but Veeam software solutions also leverage AWS service in another way, as a backup repository, for instance. If we think about Veeam Backup Replication, the tool we use to back up our local physical infrastructure and vSphere Hyper-V environments, Also there we can leverage AWS services by using the S3 possibilities, the storage possibilities as a remote backup repository. Until now, with version 11, we can use it within the sober environment to make archiving tiers and so on. With version 12, which will be coming very soon available, we will be able to do a direct backup to S3 storage, so which will be a nice additional feature within Veeam Backup Replication. So there you can leverage the storage of AWS. And a product I didn't talk about it, Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 version 6 at this moment. Also there, we can leverage the storage services of AWS by backing up directly or creating copies to Amazon S3 services, storage services, Glacier, Deep Archive, and so on, just to have multiple copies of your data. So if something happens, you're really well protected. That's very short, the overview of the native Veeam for AWS solution and how other products can leverage also the storage of AWS. If you have more questions afterwards, here you see our general email address of the software division where you can ask the questions for AWS and for Veeam software. So that's tdas_software.be@tdsynics.com. They just changed it because next week we're changing our name also. We won't be any more Big Data, but TD Synics Belgium. And of course, we have a direct number to the group of people who are doing AWS and Veeam and VMware and so on. That's the 025838310. So please send us or contact us with any question. And that's it for me. Thank you. And I'll hand over to Ivan, I think, for the AWS part.
Thanks you, Thierry.
Thanks, Thierry. Okay, I'm gonna try and share my screen really quick. So to avoid disruption, so I'm not gonna go into the full screen mode, so hopefully it works okay for everyone. Just wanted to confirm you can see my screen.
Yes, it works. Thank you.
Perfect. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Ivan Skulin is here. I'm a senior partner solution architect focusing on storage partnerships in AWS. So my main topic today is to talk to you about modernizing backup and data protection and how AWS can help customers modernize backup. Okay, so this slide is not meant to scare everyone away talking about data growth. It's more about just to demonstrate the opportunity. Well, obviously data growth presents a challenge to many customers, but also presents the opportunity for partners, for us as a technology vendors to help customers solve their issues. So interestingly, this particular prediction says that by 2025, the entire humanity will generate 175 zettabytes of data. Zettabyte is, of course, 1 trillion gigabytes. So just to demonstrate the scale of the issue. And again, interestingly, before 2003, the entire humanity only created half a zettabyte of data since the time they started creating digital data. Right now it's moving to 175, and over the last few years, you can see 5.3 times increase. So yeah, but at the same time, obviously not all data is created equal. So as a partners or as technology or service providers, I think it's also our duty to help customer to classify data, to identify which data actually needs to be protected and stored long term, and which data probably is better be excluded from the backup policies. So key considerations for data protection. Thierry made my job easier because he already explained in details why customers keep protecting their data. They keep creating multiple restore points, because it's not just about redundancy, it's also about having multiple recovery points. So the customer has somewhere to get back to in case they identify the data is corrupted, either accidentally or maliciously, or maybe it was infected by malware, and ransomware is obviously just one type of malware. But at the end of the day, customers are interested to minimize the time it takes to recover the data. They want to minimize the data loss to meet their recovery point objectives, and they want to balance cost with business risk. Not all data created equal. Some data, restore times for some data, they can quite tolerate 24 hours, while for some data, a minimal disruption is unacceptable. So 2 more technical slides. This is the status quo still for many customers. So this is what they do, this is what they know, and this is how they approached the underlying storage architecture for their backup data over the years or even decades. So this is based on disk, on specialized deduplication appliances and physical tapes for long-term storage. Well, the advantages are clear because the tape cartridge is actually really cheap. It's dense. You essentially store multiple terabytes of data in a single cartridge, and the cost is extremely low. But obviously that's just only one part of the total cost picture, because if you add to that the actual hardware, the tape hardware, tape libraries, tape drives, all the effort required to create those tapes and ship those tapes to an offsite location, add to that a periodic technology refreshes, the constant technology upgrade cycle, as we call it, because in a few years' time, the current tape technology may not be quite compatible with the tape technology of the future. At least this is how it worked up to now. And of course, shipping tape media to an offsite location and back typically requires a contract with an external service provider. So customers who see their contract like this about to expire oftentimes look at the alternative options. And alternative options definitely exist. And this is where hyperscalers like AWS comes into conversation with a story about modernizing backup. So traditional backup on premises, backup appliance in the primary data center, the secondary backup appliance in the remote data center. In case of a disaster, the second copy of backup data is available for restore. What are the options actually? So I wanted just to talk to you about 2 options. One is when there is something in the middle, and there's something is called AWS Storage Gateway. And another option where customers' backup application can communicate directly with the cloud storage service through the built-in connector. Thierry talked a lot about Veeam, and good thing is Veeam actually can deliver both of those approaches. So just wanted to give you an example, but let's talk about 4 major use cases. So what customers actually can do with the cloud technology and a backup technology provider like Veeam. So first, they can quite easily extend their existing backup repository to the cloud. In Veeam's terms, it's called scale-out backup repository. There is an existing one. The data keeps growing, and many customers can face the situation where there's simply not sufficient capacity to store all the backup data. And with all the logistics disruptions currently in place, the good alternative is to just leverage the cloud storage service, which is essentially a few clicks away. So all they need to do is just to subscribe to the service and start uploading the data into S3. So that's one approach, direct integration with S3. But there are other situations, like for example, a customer, which, by the way, I had this conversation early this week. So they decided at some point to go all in. So they will be 100% in the cloud, and they will shut down all of their data center that they currently operate and manage. But they have a tape archive, an archive on the tape, actually not an archive, but the long-term backup data that needs to be retained for many years according to their compliance requirements. So what do you do in cases like this? Because essentially there's no way to ship physical tape media to AWS. So instead, what they will do is they will use Veeam Backup and Replication, because it's the application that created the backup data, and they will use tape copy functionality, Veeam's native copy functionality, to migrate their backups, long-term backups from physical tapes to virtual tapes. And this is actually what AWS Storage Gateway, a service, is designed for. It can be installed, it can be deployed into a virtual environment in the customer data center, and expose over industry standard iSCSI interface all the necessary tape devices. So tape library, tape drives, and also virtual tape media. So it's up to customer to decide which LTO generation they will select. And then using Veeam, they will migrate, they will use tape copy functionality, they copy everything between physical and virtual media, and then AWS Storage Gateway will upload all the data to Amazon S3. Well, not customer managed Amazon S3, it's a service managed S3. So customers shouldn't even be concerned about creating Amazon S3 buckets and managing that data. So it's virtually unlimited capacity. And interestingly, after that, the customer can decommission everything. So they will decommission even the virtual machine where AWS Storage Gateway was running. They will decommission their VMware environment on premises, and they will shut down their data center completely. Once they're in the cloud, if request comes to restore from the data from 5 or 7 years ago, all they have to do is to spin up a new storage gateway appliance, which will expose again the virtual tape infrastructure, virtual tapes, and they will start retrieving the data, again, only if request comes. But when they move in the cloud as an existing Veeam customer, they are more likely to use more extensively Veeam Backup for AWS rather than Veeam Backup and Replication, unless they decided to do to migrate to use a slightly different migration strategy. So they decided to migrate to VMware on AWS. We have a service called VMware Cloud on AWS. If for some reason VMware is sticky and the customer has lots of automation and processes built around VMware, and they are not in a position to migrate to Amazon EC2, to Amazon infrastructure service, they can migrate to VMware, but it's going to be running on AWS. And this is another example where Veeam Backup and Replication can help with the actual migration and can help with virtual machine protection in the VMware cloud. And the fourth use case, cloud native backup and recovery. Again, Thierry already mentioned Veeam Backup for AWS, a different product, but covered by the Veeam Universal License, or can be simply deployed through a marketplace and built in a cloud-friendly manner. All right, so let me jump straight to the storage layer, to the underlying storage layer, and I wanted to talk in a little bit more depth about Amazon S3 and Amazon S3 as a service. So first and foremost, Amazon S3 was designed with the highest possible durability in mind. You probably heard about 11 nines of durability, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit more how we actually achieved this incredible number. So it comes down to several things, to several layers. So it starts with the way AWS region is designed. Thierry already mentioned redundancy. So redundancy is absolutely key here, because if you look at the AWS region and its anatomy, you will see there are at least 3 availability zones. What exactly availability zone is, you can think of it as a data center in a building. Actually, it can be more than one data center in a building. And another availability zone will be dozens of kilometers away. It will use independent power, cooling, and networking. At the same time, those availability zones, or AZ, will be interconnected with an extremely low latency network to ensure that data is replicated synchronously and with the lowest latency possible. So this is the underlying physical design. Now the service itself, how Amazon S3 achieves high redundancy. So it's redundancy both within availability zone and across multiple availability zone. So when customer's application, when backup tool, for example, like Veeam Backup and Replication, writes data to S3, the data is stored redundantly across multiple devices. As I said, with synchronous replication, it's much easier to write an object as soon as possible and return success status for the request back to an application. So what else? In addition to high redundancy and storing data redundantly within AZ and across multiple availability zones, there's also a number of safeguards and mechanisms to ensure that in case there is a device failure, this device failure is quickly detected, identified, and fixed. Everything on the fly. So the entire idea that the durability and availability of the service is not compromised, because in reality, device will just keep failing and failing over time, all the time, right? So that's the failure detection and restoring redundancy back to normal, the internal mechanism to do that. Excuse me. Then there's also data integrity checks, which are running in the background all the time. And once using the checksums, of course. So once the issue is identified, again, the data integrity is remediated. So all this combination of mechanisms and processes in combination, this is what allows Amazon S3 to achieve and advertise the 11 nines of durability. Because again, back to the term itself, durability is all about whether your application gets the data back after this data was written to S3. So from redundancy and durability, let's talk a little bit about Amazon S3 features aimed at securing and protecting the data. And some of those features really align well with Veeam. Veeam has a pretty good integration with some of them. So first and foremost, whenever a customer creates a bucket, a single unit of management in S3, it always gets created with public access blocked. So what that means from the security point of view is that only the identity which Veeam as an application uses to communicate with S3, to authenticate, for example, with S3. This is the only identity which are allowed to do anything with S3. For example, write data or read data back. S3 encryption. So every object written to S3 is by default encrypted at rest. So if in an unlikely situation where device gets into wrong hands, there's no way to read the information contained in the object because it's encrypted. It's a native S3 feature, but obviously for customers who want to have a full control of the encryption key management, there is an alternative way to use Veeam itself as for an encryption key management. So encryption, both in-flight and at rest, can be achieved for security conscious customers. S3 object lock. So this is the technology which allows customers to turn Amazon S3 into a write once, read many storage device, essentially. So in a way, it's similar to good old CDR, DVD-R media, where once data is written, it can never be deleted or modified. Only additional blocks of data or files can be added, but nothing can be deleted or modified. This is a little bit smarter, of course, because object lock and this write once, read many functionality is only active, is only enabled until the time this object lock expires. So object lock has a date attribute, but if you switch the compliance mode on, there is absolutely no way for anyone or anything to reset that date. For example, to reset that to an earlier date. The date can be reset to a later point in time, but not to a previous point in time. So not even AWS as a service provider can delete that data. So it's truly warm, write once, read many. It's certified by Security and Exchange Commission, who actually has a certification authority on write once, read many storage devices. So the customers are covered, which is especially important for global financial customers because their compliance requirements often dictate that the data must be stored in a immutable format. Again, where Veeam comes into play, all customers of Veeam backup and replication product has to do is to check the box called immutability and then specify a number of days during which the backup data will be essentially immutable. Once this period is over, Veeam will reset and remove the object log, and then data can be aged off and deleted to give room for new backup data, which obviously keeps coming in every night during the typical backup window. S3 versioning, another mechanism to ensure the data is protected and protected against corruption, accidental deletions. So Amazon S3 has that functionality as well. And by the way, when customers use immutability feature in Veeam, so underneath the S3 bucket will leverage both of those functions, S3 object log and S3 versioning. Excuse me. S3 replication mentioned here. Well, the customers can use the replication feature built in, for example, if they want to have another copy of the data in a totally different AWS region. However, with backup applications, it's generally recommended to leave it up to backup tool itself to manage the replication process and manage additional copy process. And one last slide I wanted to talk to you about. This relates to cost optimization. So Amazon S3 is not flat. It does provide multiple storage tiers, which in Amazon S3 terms are called storage classes. So from left to right, there is a S3 standard, which is designed for frequently accessed data. And let's jump over to the right-hand side to S3 Glacier Deep Archive. It's the coldest storage class, which is designed for the backup data, for example, end of year backup copies that must be retained for 5, 7, 8, or 9 years. So many customers have many different compliance requirements around long-term storage, but this is the use case for S3 Glacier Deep Archive. And everything that's in between, you don't necessarily have to memorize those storage classes straight away, but the idea is on the left, the storage class is for the most frequently accessed data, and it costs nothing to read the data back. As you go further to the right-hand side, for example, S3 standard IA, it's 50% less expensive when we talk about the storage cost, but the to read the data back, the customer will have to pay a little extra. As they move further to the right, S3 Glacier and S3 Glacier Deep Archive, so the data is not even immediately accessible. So the data will be retrieved automatically. And by the way, Veeam Backup and Replication supports those two cold storage classes, so Glacier Flexible Retrieval and Glacier Deep Archive. So the entire retrieval and restore process will be managed by Veeam. It's just important to keep in mind that it will take from minutes to 24 hours before the data will be actually retrieved and available to be restored back to the production server where initial backup copy was taken. So yeah, Veeam is really good when it comes to integration with Amazon S3. Not each and every one of those storage classes is supported, but standard IA, S3 one zone IA is supported as well. And the two on the right-hand side. It used to be known as Glacier, now it's Glacier Flexible Retrieval, and S3 Glacier Deep Archive. So let us know if you need any advice, any help on selecting the right storage class, because again, as I mentioned, Veeam is really good. There are multiple options to design the underlying storage architecture, and we are happy to help you. So I think that's it from me today. So thank you very much for your time, and if you still have any questions, I'm here to try and answer those.
Thank you, Ivan, for your information. It was very clear. Terry, you have something else to add, or?
Not at this moment.
Okay, let's
Thank you for-
start some Q&A. Are there questions? I think Avi has unmuted everybody. Any questions at this time? Maybe raise the hands. Now, there are also some quite important benefits of working with Tech Data on AWS. So we will send you all some more information. We've also sent you a link to this video, to the webinar. And if you need more information, you can always contact us. We also sent our contact details, of course. And if you want to know more about working with Tech Data on AWS, we can set up a small meeting and talk about benefits and margin and stuff like that. Any questions at this time?
Don't see any in the chat box also.
No, not at this time. Okay, so I think that we can close off at this moment. Thank you everybody for watching this webinar and participating. And you will hear from us, and hopefully we will hear from you also. Thank you, Ivan and Thierry and Avi to help me in this presentation.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.